Alright, you little resin junkies. I have been sitting on this video for over a month now just because I haven't had time to record this voiceover. I finally got a little bit of time, so I'm going to take you through how I made this 18-inch diameter epoxy resin river Lazy Susan. I'm not going to remember all the details, of course, it's been a while, but there's a big tip at the end installing the Lazy Susan hardware that I think is going to help a lot of people. So we're starting out mixing up the Total Boat thick set. That means I've already made my mold and I've already kind of fit my pieces of spalted pecan to the mold. We'll kind of hit on that a little bit, but it's kind of glanced over in this video. The client asked for a maroonish color, kind of like a Texas A&M Aggie maroon, with a marbling effect. And the marbling effect I basically get with the thick set resin by not touching it too much. You can put swirls and stuff in, but it's basically the exothermic reaction which will give the effect, so super easy to do. And if you're wondering where I'm at, I'm actually making this pour in a climate controlled storage unit. I have a very tiny shop at home, so I found, especially when doing multiple resin projects and these resins that take a little longer than 24 hours to cure, just rent a storage building as your resin room. Very few tools you need to pour resin actually require power, and cordless tools are everywhere nowadays. So handy little tip if you're in a small shop like me, that way you can continue working while your resin is setting up. But from here you can see I'm just pouring in some highlights, trying to give that resin a little more movement as it cures. And you've seen the rest in all the other videos. Roll the montage! Alright, enough of all of that. Let's get back to work now. At the shop I'm working at, they have a wide belt sander that has an 80, 120, and 180 grit belt all through there. So I kind of get to cheat by having access to this, because this is how I slowly work the wood down level with the resin. But if I didn't have that, I would make a router sled to bring down that wood level. But there's a lot of ways to do it. You just got to be creative with what you got. Now here I'm using the CNC to inlay where the Lazy Susan hardware is going to go. If you don't have access to a CNC, which a lot of us don't, you make a quick little circle jig for your router. If you don't want to make a circle jig for your router, they sell one. In fact, I have one. I reviewed it way back on my main channel, Brad's Workbench, by Milescraft, and it's awesome. The main thing you want to do here is make sure you get the thickness correct. Don't inlay it all the way down because you need a little bit to stick out, a little clearance from the table. And also, I've got to stress this, if you're going to inlay your Lazy Susan hardware like I did, you're going to have to cut the outer diameter at the same time or directly after. You don't want to be moving your circle jig, because then you always risk not being exactly centered up like you were with the inside, and then you have a wobbly Lazy Susan. And nobody wants to buy a wobbly Lazy Susan. I mean, would you? I think not. Alright, so after it's cut out and off of the CNC, I went ahead and sanded to 220 grit. Now, this is going to have a resin finish, so I probably could have got away without even sanding this high, but it's just kind of a better safe than sorry type of thing. And after sanding, we will head back to the storage unit where I will finish it with a top coat of Total Boat tabletop resin. Now, I did seal this with one coat of shellac. Mostly just because the wood was punky, so I didn't want all the resin just to get sucked up by the wood. Now, I do have a few resin finishing tips for you guys, but before that, I want to make sure I tell you guys to hit subscribe, because I have a huge video coming up where I'm going to go through a variety of resins and tell you what I think their best applications are. I've used everything from Total Boat Thick Set, Total Boat Slow, Medium Cure. I've used Incredible Solutions Pourable Plastic Casting Resin, Pro Marine's new deep pour casting resin, Epoxy, and I can't even remember the tabletop resin we use at work. I can't remember the name of it. So I've got a wide variety of experience with a wide variety of resins, and I'm going to share that with you guys. So if you're into resin casting, resin turning, resin finishing, you're going to want to hit subscribe. Stay tuned to this channel because that video is going to be coming out soon. So after the resin cured, it's time to install the hardware. Now this is the hardware I bought. You can find these on Amazon in any size you want. The biggest thing I was worried about here was making sure my screws did not go in the resin river because it's semi-translucent. You could definitely see a screw poking through. Now this was my first time using this type of hardware, so I did run into an issue, and I found out others have run into this issue. I'm going to kind of tell you about the way you don't waste your time like I did. So I pre-drilled my holes, put all my screws in, and you'll see that it just didn't turn freely. Once I tightened down my screws, I could not turn that the bearing, the Lazy Susan hardware, I couldn't. It was just tight. I could turn it if I really yanked on it, but it definitely wasn't going to work for sitting on a table and turning it by hand. So my first thought was, okay, I must have got my tolerances too tight, especially I did it on a CNC that leaves very little room for adjustment or play. Wiggle room, you could say. So I just took it out to the shop and gave the outside diameter a little sand, but I found out I didn't really need to be doing this. What I eventually figured out after way too long was it was the screws that were causing the issue. Even though I was screwing the Lazy Susan hardware down by hand, it was still putting too much pressure between the screw and the Lazy Susan itself that the hardware was not able to spin freely. So the easiest solution I found was I found the smallest washers I had in my shop, the thinnest basically, and put them in between the hardware and the Lazy Susan itself. That way I could still tighten down the screws all the way, and it still allowed the ring to move freely. As soon as I did that, it worked perfectly, no issues at all. Wish I would have thought about that because I wasted a good hour out here in the shop doing nothing basically. There she is. I am so happy with this now. I know this wasn't a wood turning project, but it's wood and it turned. It was nice to do something I had never done before, and I just thoroughly enjoyed every step of this project. See, I think for a resin and wood project, a resin finish just makes sense. For one, I don't have to sand as high, and two, it seals up the wood to minimize any movement you're going to get because you're not going to get the moisture penetrating. And it's just gorgeous. It's gorgeous. It offers great protection. It is a glossy finish. You know, you can't get a satin resin, you know, not yet at least. So there will still be times where I do go the lacquer route, you know, and the only other downside is the bottom side never looks really completely finished with the resin finish. But look at it. Ain't nobody going to be flipping this bad boy over. They're going to be admiring the beauty of it. Links for Total Boat products and a discount code in the description. So I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Glamour shots at the end. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. I'll holler at you next time. Peace!